iron, copper, oil, uranium. A favorable geographical location. It would seem that this country has everything for prosperity, and its inhabitants for well-being. But in reality, life here can be compared to hell. A collapsed economy, lawlessness, hunger, poverty, violence, and death with microscopic islands of stability. Western attempts to help regulate the situation in the country have only driven its residents into the arms of militants. The government does not strive to resolve the conflict. On the contrary, it makes every effort to maintain it, to fill their pockets with money coming from Western states. Trying to normalize the situation here is like washing a pig. You clean it, and it goes and rolls in even filthier mud. For the residents of this country, taking a firearm with them when leaving the house is as natural as putting on shoes. Perhaps even more natural, because not everyone has shoes here. But a pistol or an automatic rifle can be found in every, even the poorest, hut. It is the only country in the world where anarchy exists not just in words but in practice. Every third child here does not live to the age of 5. All the residents dream of escaping their country to somewhere with an easier life anywhere, really. In 1980, the literacy rate was a record low of just 6.1%. Since then, the situation has improved, but only slightly, and this state remains one of the least literate in the world. Over 40% of the population, according to statistics, survive on less than $1 a day. Meanwhile, the international poverty line is $1.09 per person per day. There are no longer any state institutions in this country. Since 1988, the country has been in a civil war involving the entire population. After the dictatorial regime collapsed, the country disintegrated into numerous self-governing enclaves, creating quasi-states. The country plunged into the abyss of civil war. Interclan contradictions are flaring up with increasing intensity. The fierce military conflict is gaining momentum and takes dozens of lives every day. We will tell you about this country right now, but first, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. And we continue. This is Somalia. Recently, the human rights organization Transparency International published a report naming Somalia the most corrupt country in the world for the past 11 years. But it was not always so. The reasons for the collapse of the state lie in the territorial fragmentation inherited from its colonial past. At that time, the country was divided into Italian, British, and French parts, and clans constantly fought for power. Nomads desperately tried to divide water, pastures, and livestock. The serious contradictions between them were fueled by the confrontation between moderate and radical Islamists, as well as constant interference from neighboring countries, particularly Ethiopia and Eritrea. In 1960, Somalia gained independence. It was then that the two former colonies, Italian Somaliland and British Somaliland, formally united. In the first decade after this, Somalia was a fairly stable and prosperous country. Like Ethiopia, Somalia fell into the sphere of interest of the Soviet Union. With Moscow support, military academies were established here, and a unified army, called the Lions of Africa, was created. Economic and technical assistance from the brotherly African Republic flowed steadily. The country received uniforms and tanks. In return, the Soviet Navy got its base in Berbera. Gradually, Somalia's territorial ambitions grew. The country began to make claims on neighboring states Kenya, Ethiopia, and Djibouti. Everything changed in 1977 when the Somali authorities decided to attack the Soviet Union's other ally in the Horn of Africa, Ethiopia. Moscow had to choose which side to support in the conflict. The Ethiopian government appeared more reliable and stable. As a result, with the help of Soviet weapons and the active involvement of Cuban volunteers, the Ethiopian army defeated the Somali forces. This war triggered an economic and political crisis in the 1980s. Somalia gradually descended into a rebel war. The pro-Soviet president, Mohammed Siad Barre, was overthrown, and the country plunged into chaos. At that time, more than 50,000 people fled to Yemen alone. Now, after decades of military dictatorship, civil war, and foreign intervention, the Somali military lacks even basic resources for radio communication and equipment. Soldiers communicate using mobile phones, which are easily tracked. There are also issues with uniforms, as many soldiers are barely clothed and wear flip-flops. One of the main security problems in Somalia is the Al-Shabaab group. The terrorists are so deeply intertwined with the government and the population that it's difficult to distinguish between them. Many Somalis join the militants. Often, within a single family, some relatives fight for the Somali armed forces while others fight with the terrorists. Militants easily persuade potential recruits by promising, for example, a mobile phone in exchange for loyal service. If promises are not kept, recruits easily switch sides to the government forces. The dire economic situation, the lack of centralized power, hunger, and poverty have driven residents of Somalia's coastal areas to piracy. Most Somali pirates were once ordinary fishermen who fished off the coast of the country while the Somali Navy protected fishing grounds from foreign intruders in territorial waters. After the overthrow of dictator Mohammed Bar in 1991, peaceful fishing fell apart. Civil war broke out, the country split into warring factions, the traditional economy collapsed, and people had to find ways to survive. Somalis then began to hijack passing tankers, trawlers, and cargo ships. Pirates generally fell into three categories: fishermen, who due to their experience and knowledge, developed operations, former militants or soldiers, and specialists, technicians skilled in handling complex ship equipment. Near Somalia run the routes of ships traveling from the Persian Gulf and Asian countries to the Mediterranean via the Suez Canal, as well as ships bound for ports on the Indian Ocean coast of Africa. Given the intense trade contacts between Asian and European countries, the large volume of ships carrying valuable cargo presents many targets for potential hijacking. The Somali government is interested in maintaining the status quo and continuing the conflict. Moreover, the Somali authorities are reluctant to sacrifice their power to the state structure proposed by Western countries. The economic situation in Somalia particularly worsened in 2016 to 2017 due to prolonged drought. Harvest forecasts in the southern and central regions of Somalia fell to extremely low levels, 75% below the average of the previous 5 years. The prolonged drought in Somalia led to a severe shortage of drinking water supplies, widespread crop failure, and a sharp increase in food prices. There is a particular threat of famine in rural areas and Mogadishu. This is also confirmed by a World Bank report from July 2017. The drought in Somalia led to a total crop failure, an agricultural crisis, increased unemployment, widespread water and food shortages, and mass livestock deaths. Thus, in 2016 to 2017, Somalia's economy suffered enormous losses, seriously exacerbating the humanitarian situation in the country. In particular, livestock, the backbone of Somalia's economy, decreased by $1.7 billion, and the agricultural sector incurred losses amounting to $60 million. The severe economic situation and climatic shocks have led to critically high levels of overall acute malnutrition. More than 15% of Somalia's population is acutely malnourished. Moreover, about 3.5% of the country's population suffers from a particularly severe form of acute malnutrition, posing a life-threatening danger. The prevalence of acute malnutrition, combined with a lack of access to clean drinking water, has also led to an increase in the number of infectious diseases. Currently, those working in the public sector earn around $400 a month. People engaged in private business have a higher income. The tax system is not very well developed, so you can earn as much as you want. No one controls this. The main source of income for many families is remittances from abroad. Many have relatives who have gone abroad. All immigrants help family members who remain in Somalia. The October Revolution, civil war, dictatorship, famine, devastation, the construction of socialism and its abandonment, rampant banditry and separatism, ending in the collapse of the state, all this has been experienced by the unfortunate country. Somalia is located almost on the equator and has maritime territories. There are iron, copper, oil, and uranium deposits here. The country is far from being a desert. In fact, its citizens could live peacefully, happily, and most importantly, prosperously. But in reality, life here can be compared to hell. That's all for now. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and see you next time.